Welcome to Voices in Leadership, where leaders who connect, inspire, and grow come to share their stories live. I'm your host, Dr. Angela J. Buckley. Join us as we explore authentic leadership, gratitude, and the power of connection through powerful conversations with inspiring voices. Let's inspire, uplift, and elevate leadership that truly makes a difference together. Well, hello. Thank you for joining us once again for another episode of Voices in Leadership. Today we are here with Brian Proctor, and Brian and I have met and conversed over the last year and a half maybe, on gratitude, the topics of gratitude, and how gratitude impacts profitability, customer experience, employee experience in the workplace. So Brian, welcome. I'm so glad you're here today.
Well, thanks. I'm glad we were able to get together on this. It should be fun.
Thank you again for joining. And thank you also for being a member of the Gratitude Leadership Collective.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I've enjoyed the conversations over there. So if you would give me just 1 second, I would like to introduce you and read your bio. So Brian is the founder of the Leeds Hospitality Group. It's a leading hospitality consulting firm after following 40 years career in that industry with companies like Starwood Hotels, Resorts, Evolution Hospitality, Bridge Street Global Hospitality, and Four Seasons. In addition, he's the host of the popular gratitude-centered podcast, Tuesday's Thanks, where he interviews senior hospitality leaders about their journey and provides them with the opportunity to thank those who have helped them along the way. His gratitude journey continues to evolve, and he has recently developed the Power of Gratitude at Work program, in which he speaks to organizations about adding gratitude to their toolbox of culture-related enhancements through actionable daily activities that their leaders can undertake. He's an ambassador of gratitude. Brian is helping the next generation of leaders to embrace gratitude as an integral part of their leadership skills, which is why we get along so well. So, Brian.
You make me sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Well, thank you for talking about gratitude, and thank you for showing what those actionable steps, maybe those tips that people can take, because I think what I've seen is that many people are thankful, and yet other people don't perceive them as such. Have you experienced that in your journey, and how does that impact you?
Yeah, I think, people by nature, right? Gratitude's a great human emotion, and most people are grateful for 90% of their time, but it's the way that they express it. And if they're not, it's kind of like any muscle, right? That's, we call it the practice of gratitude. And if you're not practicing it, then you're not going to do it. And there's so many insecurities, anxieties about saying thank you, because unfortunately, some people see gratitude and saying thank you as a weakness, as a leadership tool, versus what it really is a strength. So there's lots of things getting in the way of it. So what we try to do is try to break down those barriers and walk them through daily actionable items, which we can get into probably later, some of them, as to how they can start their day, end their day with gratitude on the forefront, and really build it into that habit forming, so that it's not really anything you think about, it just becomes you.
So do you start, I see so many journals, so many people have journals, they sell gratitude journals, etc. Do you start with that? Right? We want to have that internally, that's an important part of this, but what's your starting point with people?
I've never been a good journaler, although I do incorporate it into our program. It's just not for me. Right. And that's a great thing about gratitude. There's no one size fit all thing. You're going to handle this your own way. But a lot of people love it. I'm not a big fan of spending that much time journaling. So for me, it's more of I've gotten into the habit of doing certain things during the day by virtue of setting up cues and reminders, because even now it still takes that reminder saying, hey, today's Thursday, I'd like to shoot out a handwritten message of thanks to somebody. And that's in my task to do in Outlook, so that when I pop up the computer on Thursday morning, it reminds me to do that, even at this point.
Oh, nice. I like using pop-up reminders. They're
Mhm.
actually, it's kind of my friend.
I have
Yep.
so many tasks lined up for the next 6 months. It's crazy.
What's your favorite reminder tool? Like, what do you use to organize your thoughts?
I'm well online. I use Outlook with tasks, right,
Okay.
and it just pops up every day. But what I tend to do is take a couple minutes every day or two to just think about what I want to be doing. And I'm a huge note taker in meetings and calls. So I love handwriting. I'm not a great technology guy because I'm old, but so the Remarkable 2, this is not a plug, but the Remarkable 2 for me has been a godsend, because it feels like you're writing on paper. You don't have to have paper everywhere, and you can really just take it with you and use that as my note taker, and that's where I jot everything down, and then I transcribe it into tasks and Outlook and things of that nature.
Brian, don't you travel a lot in your job?
I used to travel about 250,000 miles a year. My for 15, 17 years, maybe even 19 or 20, car service would pick me up on Monday morning, take me to the airport, and I'd come home Friday night type of deal. But now it's a lot less. So it's totally manageable now. But yeah, in the early days, I lived on I always said my office was in seat 2B on any United flight at the time.
The reason I ask is because that's what drove me to some of the more digital note-taking applications. I did find one that I really liked because it was still handwriting, but you would take a picture of it and it would scan it, and it used optical character recognition. And then I wasn't carrying multiple notebooks, because what I found traveling internationally was that I needed 3 or 4 notebooks, and it wasn't like I could just go home and get it next week, right? If I needed something. So that's why I'm curious, if you are that dedicated to being handwritten notes, what did you do when you, like,
Well,
I just
I'm
felt like I had so much to carry.
I'm laughing because before, I wish I'd had Remarkable 2 back then.
Oh,
Before, you
you have
know,
to,
when I was with Starwood, a good 10 years of my existence there was leading a team called New Builds and Transitions. So we were working with developers and owners in developing new hotels all the way through construction, design, and opening them, right? So we would be working on, at any one time, you'd be working in a day, maybe 12 or 13 projects. So I would have a notepad, like the old legal pad
yes,
for each one. And so, my back was killing me because
right.
your backpack's only so big. So I was laughing when you said that, because I used to have paper everywhere.
So you're using Remarkable now.
Yeah, that's a godsend.
Okay. So I started using Rocketbook.
Don't know that one.
So Rocketbook is there. It's kind of like a stone paper with a veneer, and you use erasable ink. And so you write on a page, you take the picture, and then you literally wipe the page off with water.
Oh, wow.
And so it's the same notebook all the time, but maybe there's 30 pages in the notebook. So just periodically you go through and wipe it down and go back to page 1, and you just keep going. And at the bottom, there's these little icons. So you hit X, and when you take the picture, it will go into those folders. And so you can pre-program where those are going, and you can change them over time, right? So
Yeah.
if it gives you an opportunity to have about 8 different projects open.
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways to manage your time, but like I said, I just take copious amounts of notes.
Yeah. I'm just grateful that I don't have to carry all the paper.
Yeah.
Yep.
Me too. I agree wholeheartedly.
So my back is also very grateful.
I can bet.
Not gonna lie. So okay. So Brian, why did you choose hospitality?
I really don't think I chose it. I think, this is going to sound corny, but I think it chose me. And as the story goes, I don't recall this exactly the way I'm going to tell it, but I'm going to tell it as my father used to tell people. So when I was about 12 years old, it was a Sunday morning, and my dad was giving a speech the next day at a hotel downtown. I grew up in Montreal. So he was giving a speech at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. And he said, hey, anybody want to come downtown with me and hang around the hotel while I practice my speech? Well, I idolized my dad. So I said, hands up, I'll come. So we drove down, and we drove up to the front door of the hotel, which is right smack downtown Montreal. And in those days, Queen Elizabeth doormen were all in the Beefeaters type uniform. And so they opened the door. They knew my dad. They said, oh, Mr. Proctor, great to see you. Are you coming into, they just knew why he was there. And I'm looking going, wow, these guys all know my dad. And so we went in, and back in the days, I mean, it's still a spectacular hotel today, but it was very rich in colors and fabrics, and everybody in the crisp uniforms. And they were treating my dad like somebody special. And you went in the ballroom, and they were getting it all set up, and that was cool. And then my dad said to somebody, he said, hey, listen, can you guys take my son, take him to the restaurant, which was called the Beaver Club, where my dad's company had a table, and said, get him started on lunch, and I'll join him in half an hour. So they took me in. They treated me like I was somebody. I'm 12 years old, and all the fancy silverware and plates. So anyways, long story short, we're leaving. And apparently when I got in the car, I said to my dad, 12 years old, and this is the story he told, that I said to him, Dad, that was cool. I'm going to run one of those places one day. And luckily, he lived long enough to hear me get my first GM's position in California. So I kind of lived the dream. And I don't remember ever wanting to do anything else but work in hotels. I graduated high school, went to hotel school, got a job at the Westin in Calgary, Alberta, as a night auditor. First thing out of school, like 2 days after I wrote my last exam. And so I don't think I chose it. I think it chose me. And I just love dealing with people, love working with the public. And so that's kind of how that all came about.
That's a great story. Very moving. And also it's so refreshing to hear someone who has had a clear path. I would say in my friend circle, that's not the case for most of us. We're still kicking around.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because one of the joys of being the host of Tuesday's Thanks is I'm now, I've interviewed about 150 people on there, leaders and stuff. What I find fascinating is the amount of people who had no clue that they were going to get in the hospitality business, and the way that they got into the hospitality business, and the way they got to being a CEO or CFO or CMO or whatever they achieved. It's all across the pond. I mean, there's just no one way. And so to me, that's super. I find myself very boring, right? Because I went to hotel school, worked in hotels. That was a career. Boom. Now I'm doing my second act. But they're all over the place. Like John Murray, who is the CEO of Sinesta. He said on the show, he said, Brian, I'm in accounting. Well, how am I running one of the largest hotel companies in the world now? And he's doing a phenomenal job. But he said, if you had told me at any time in my career that I was going to run a hotel company, I would have said, you're nuts. But,
Right.
The board saw something in him and made him the CEO, and they've just had expansive growth under him. So you just never know where these leadership things are going to come from.
Norway does the same thing with their endurance athletes. They're like, we don't know where they're going to come from, so we train everybody. And so why not, right? And people have different strengths, and I think you build different skills, and there's a lot of value in having the different perspectives for a robust organization.
Yeah, no, I agree. The more diverse it can be, the better it's going to be, in my humble opinion.
I appreciate the different perspectives, because then someone can see my blind spots, right? Like if we're all looking from the same direction, we're only going to see what we all see. So
couldn't agree more.
That's my thought on those. So you make all my questions here so easy. Why did you choose your industry? And what about anything transformative along the way?
That's a tough one because I'm not overly bright, right? I'm a good, cruncher. I get things done. But when I think of, I don't think there was anything transformative for me along the way. I think the lessons learned along the way were, one, leadership is hard, and you've got to work at it, and you've got to continue to want to learn about it, and you want to continue to learn about things in general. So I don't know if that would be, what you're looking for in the terms of transformative, but it's just a matter of always try to keep learning. I retired, from the daily grind 5 years ago to do all this other stuff. But my youngest daughter is a software engineer, and I'm the knucklehead who's doing my own websites and things of that nature. And I don't know what I'm doing, but you're just constantly learning. And I find the same thing with leadership as I was going through the path, right? Because you start off leading a small team of maybe, 6 people working at a front desk of a hotel. And then you become a division head, and you're overseeing 5 managers who are overseeing 200 people. And then you become the general manager, and now you're overseeing the whole kit and caboodle of a hotel. You're basically a city mayor. You're running so many different aspects, and then as you go through life, you learn other ways of leadership. We were back in 2001, none of my team had offices. We had one person out of 35 people who had an office. We all lived on the road. So we were working from home before there was a work from home. How do you lead that team? What do you do to lead that team differently than when you see people every day next to you? So I think that to me was, if anything, was just a constant need to update your knowledge on how to lead. And a lot of that comes from mistakes, right? You're going to make mistakes throughout, but it's seeing how other people do it. You read books, you attend seminars, things of that nature, but just keep learning. So I don't think there was anything like a big wow moment. I think it was just gradually adding layers to that tool set. It looks like you may have frozen.
Brian, can yeah, I think from my side, it looked like you were frozen. So,
okay, now
so
we're
you're
back.
talking, yep, we're back. What happens when you were first leading those people that were remote? Was that before we had all of these nice remote tools?
Oh yeah. This is 2001. So, that's phone calls were the go-to. And again, living on a plane, you would spend a lot more time traveling to places to meet them in person. But other than that, it was just by phone calls, because there was no other technology that really, was out there. I mean, obviously email and stuff like that, but we were still working on Blackberries or Blueberries or whatever they were called, with the cool keyboards and stuff. So you had that, but yeah, it was a lot of phone calls. And I think a lot of that, one of the things I learned was hiring the right people, giving them clear, I don't want to say goals, but clear vision on what we were hoping they would achieve in whatever their role was, and then letting them go do it, and then checking in on them periodically, but not being on top of them all the time, because we'd hopefully hired the right person, and you let them go. And that was hard for me at the beginning, because as a general manager of a hotel, for example, it's kind of like being a store manager or a bank manager or a factory manager. You touch everything every single day. Nothing happens in that place without you knowing about it, being there. Well, I'm opening a hotel in Bora Bora. I'm opening a hotel in Austin, Texas. I'm opening a hotel in Aruba, and I'm opening a hotel in, all over the place. I can't be there. I can't have my fingers on anything. So you hope you put the right project managers in place. You provide them with the right tools, all the checklists and everything else that they need, and you kind of let them go. And you check in on them once a week, once every 2 weeks, or whatever the frequency is, depending on the role. And you just learn to lead that. That was tough for me.
Yeah.
That took a while to get. I don't know if I was ever good at it, but it took me a long time to really embrace it and understand it.
What was the one tool that really helped you to embrace it?
Well, it's funny. This was an old trick of the trade. We had developed, because the development and opening of a hotel, there are 4,300,000,026 things to do from the time you break ground to the time you welcome that first guest, right?
Yes.
You have sales and marketing, finance, everything in there, operations, every department, everything going on. And you're dealing with designers and developers and architects and owners and your bosses. So the one thing that I found best was to create the most amazing critical path checklists for every role, and being really, really tough on people to follow that. And that to me was one of the things, right? And my little trick of the trade, and I told all my teams afterwards when we were all moving on to different things, I said, I always knew, for example, if Angela, you were working on the St. Regis in San Francisco, for example, I would say, hey, Angela, I'm jumping on the plane because I'm flying out to meet you and the team. I'm jumping on the plane. Send me the updated critical path checklist so I can review it on the plane so we can spend more quality time together when we're in San Francisco. Because this was before Wi-Fi on planes. This was before Google Sheets and Teams and everything. Right? So if you said to me, it's on its way, when I got it, I just deleted it. But if you hummed and hawed, I knew you weren't keeping it up to date, and I knew you weren't working off it. So the meeting, when I got to San Francisco, was dramatically different.
Got it.
Than if you had said, sure, it's on its way, because then I knew you had been used, had confidence in it, and I wouldn't delete it, but I'd look at it. But the work session would be much more productive under case A than B.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was a tool that I used that seemed to work.
I am a big fan of critical paths. So as an engineer, there's a few times in my life where you've had to use that, right? There's no launch that doesn't benefit from a good critical path checklist.
Yeah, I agree. Totally.
So I love it. And then it's funny, I was thinking about accountability today as I was coming down the hill, and my Google Maps gave me the warning of police ahead. So of course I checked my speed because that's what the police were ahead doing, right? Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about accountability. And on the one hand, I was grateful for Google Maps to remind me to slow down. Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, I was like, grr, 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 cop sitting at the bottom of the hill, or speed trap, right? Except he's not. Like, we all want to grumble about the cop sitting in a speed trap, but they're also holding people accountable. And if they don't, at some point, someone dies. Like, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but there's a reason we have cops holding us accountable to speed limits. And I was just reflecting on how I felt that I was grateful for Google Maps to tell me, which is in a way an accountability check. Mm-hmm. But then also I was like not as grateful for the cop, although technically they're doing the same thing.
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned that, because and I'm not making this up. This happened to me about 2 months ago. There's a hill by our high school. The speed limit's 25 miles an hour because you're in a school zone.
School zone.
But it's very hard to go down that hill at 25 miles an hour. And of course, I was going a little more than 25 miles an hour. And sure enough, I come the corner and there's a police officer. So he pulled me over. I eventually pulled over for him off to a side street. And he was very nice. And he said, listen, we're just out here, kind of like an awareness thing. You weren't really going too fast, but you were going fast. And I said, officer, you are absolutely right. I'm in a school zone. I should, I said, it was just hard coming down the hill. So anyways, long story short, he just gave me a warning and said, just out here awareness. But I know exactly what you're saying, because there I was grateful that I had an officer who I live in a small town, so
Right.
he was forgiving of that, and we talked through it and that kind of stuff. And again, I think it's how you interact with people
Of course.
that create that. So, but you're right on the accountability thing, because he was right. I was going over the speed limit.
So it leads me to the question on how did people feel about some of those critical path conversations? Were they grateful that you were helping them maintain critical path, or did they feel like they were having their feet held to the fire? And do you think there's a better way to like navigate? Because sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's hard, right?
Yeah,
What
I
are those
think.
tips?
Well, I think the ones who were great managers and employees respected the checklist and understood the importance of it, because one of the things. So when you're opening a hotel, when you're running a hotel, I would never question a general manager. They know kind of everything, right?
Right.
But when you're opening a hotel, they've never done that before, right? So you pluck a general manager and you pluck the division heads and the department heads and the managers from other properties to come to open a new hotel. None of them have opened a hotel before.
Right.
So they realize very, very quickly the importance and validity of those critical path checklists, because otherwise they would sit at their desk, stare at a wall, and be so overwhelmed with what do I do next, right?
Yes.
Well, we've laid the roadmap for you. Just follow this. We tell you how many days from opening this needs to be accomplished, what needs to be accomplished, who needs to accomplish it. And we're there to help you if you don't know how to accomplish it. That's real easy. So those people who weren't the fly by the seat of their pants type of manager loved it. And conversely, there were some managers who were really good operators of hotels and terrible at opening.
Right.
And the other side of that was some were really good at opening hotels, but terrible at running them, which always concerned me. If you were really good at opening a hotel, I was going, oh, are they going to be able to run a hotel real well? But so those critical path checklists allowed them, it calmed them, because otherwise you just, think about yourself. If you're thrown into an environment where you've never done it before and there's nobody there with you, like I may be your boss, but I'm only going to see you once a month.
Yeah.
You want some direction. You want some clarity as to what you need to do. And if you don't have it, it can be very frustrating. So giving, clear designed objectives and checklists, huge part of leadership is being, transparent, being authentic, and being there to help type of thing.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. So, Brian, I have another question, a little bit off of this topic and moving into what are you doing with Gratitude Works and the power of gratitude at work? And how is that blending in with the Leeds Hospitality Group?
Well, it's kind of just a mess, right? Because of and I say that because when I set up Leeds Hospitality first as being a hospitality consultant, right, with corporate housing, apartments, part hotels, that kind of stuff. And then I did the Tuesday Thanks podcast, which was next. And the power of gratitude at work has really been born out of the podcast, because it got me to thinking. I'm listening to all these leaders talk about how important gratitude was in their journey and how it played such an important role. And then I started thinking, well, the more I think about it, it did play an important role in my life and things of that nature. So I kind of took my business experience, podcast, interviews, and developed it into this power of gratitude at work, which is where we kind of say it's one more tool in a leadership development's toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
Not the be all, it's not the end all. It's just one more aspect to make you, hopefully, a better leader that will have more engaged teams and will produce strong results both personally and professionally. And so we kind of just developed it through that. And we just, I talk to companies about it, and we go through go through my journey, and we talk about all the things that gratitude can do for you as a leader, and then we kind of walk them through. I developed a 15-day gratitude at work challenge for their leaders to do, because you don't want something that's going to be 6 months long. You want something 3 weeks, and then you can see if it's working and go from there. But it was really born out of the podcast and just my business career, knowing how important gratitude can be, and we've just put it together that way.
And you've been hosting.
Well, it started as doing keynote speeches at leadership conferences, and what I would do there is talk about the power of gratitude, and why gratitude matters at work. I think as part of your question as well is, why does it matter at work? Well, it again, and the fun thing, I didn't know this going into it, but there's a ton of studies out there on gratitude at work. Who knew? And
I knew.
By very smart people at some very heady institutions and things of that nature, with statistics behind them. Yes. And so, why it matters at work, and we walk the teams through and the leaders through, like higher engagement and retention from increased amounts of gratitude, increased innovation, something that I call, operational continuity, and the reduction in voluntary turnover. And people say, well, but like the numbers guys in the back of the room always look at me and say, oh, here's a foo-foo guy up there talking about, gratitude. And one of the fun things I do is I say, okay, well, let's walk through your turnover, right? So if your turnover is X and you implement a program of gratitude and some learning there, and it drops, think about what's the cost, the time and the money you spend on recruiting. Okay, just think about that time. It may not be the cost, because it's pretty cheap to put ads out on LinkedIn and Indeed and stuff, but the cost of time and money spent on recruiting. Then what's the time and money you spend on interviewing? And then the time and money you spend on hiring. And then the time and money you spend on onboarding. And then getting them trained in the front of the house. Just that alone, if you can reduce your turnover, voluntary turnover, right? Because some turnover you want, but the voluntary turnover, if you can reduce, that by 2%, just think of the dollars, bottom line, that affects your profitability. And that's just one example. If the people stay around because they feel seen, they feel valued. Ever since the pandemic, of course, that's even become more and more important. People want to have a purpose at work. They want to be seen. They want to be valued. They want to be appreciated. If you can provide that work environment and you reduce your turnover, the operational continuity in and of itself is going to create innovation, because now you're not constantly turning the bodies over. They're there when your client is coming in. They're there when the guest is checking in. So the other employees aren't covering, right? So there's a reduction in overtime. Everybody's stress levels are lower. The service is better. If I've been there 2 years versus 2 months, I'm going to suggest, in a good working environment, hey, boss, if we can do this, it'll be that much better for the client or that much better for the guest. That's operational continuity, making innovation bigger and better. Innovation, everybody thinks, what's the latest tech stack, that type of thing. Innovation comes in little dribs and drabs on those one-on-one environments where you're with your guest. So all of those things become a financial windfall. And is it difficult to measure? Yeah, but there's ways you can do that, because you set baselines and then you set programs in place. And then 30, 60, 90 days down, you retest via questionnaires and surveys and all that kind of stuff. And your, ENPS, right? Your employee net promoter scores and stuff like that. And it develops a much stronger trust in your leadership too.
Yes.
Right. So all of those things kind of come into play. And so in a very quick, 40-second soundbite, to me, that's why gratitude matters at work. Just in one avenue, just with the turnover, just when you bring that up. And every once in a while when I'm talking, you'll see the finance guys going, okay, I get it. That makes sense. That makes sense. And then they buy into it. And if you can get a finance guy to buy into that, then you're golden.
I'm going to take this snippet and send it to all the finance guys. My
Uh-oh,
dissertation was basically this, but based in manufacturing.
Yeah.
So yes, we spent many times, and it's very difficult to get the finance guys on board with that. And yet we show the numbers over and over again.
Yeah. And you know, that's a great thing about this whole, I call this my second act, right? The podcast, and now this power of gratitude at work. It transcends all industries. Right?
It does. Absolutely.
Right? Because it's a matter of instituting that daily habit of gratitude, the daily practice of gratitude. And you can do it in hotels, you can do it in hospitals, you can do it in factories, you can do it in car dealerships, whatever it is. If you put your mind to it, it's really easy to take the 15-day gratitude at work challenge, and I can adapt that to any industry because it's very generic in its thing, where every day we ask you to do certain things, and then every day changes based upon what you have. So if you don't mind, I can kind of walk you kind of through what that is.
Sure.
So, for example, one day I always say, start with first thing in the morning. And again, this is going to be contradictory because I said I don't believe in journaling, but I always said, just write down something when you sit down at your work and you open up, what are you thankful for that day? Just to get your mind going, right?
Yep.
So that's one thing you can do. It doesn't take long, right? But again, you need the cue to do that. Number two, we said, okay, what if you were to, on that day, you knew you were having a one-on-one session, right? Take 2 minutes before you sit down with Angela, if I'm your supervisor, and think, okay, what has Angela done lately that I'm thankful for? And then you start the one-on-one session with that, right? Now, maybe tomorrow you have a team meeting. Start the team meeting with what you're grateful for. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. You can work on a gratitude tree. You can work on a gratitude wall in the employee entrance and things of that nature. Then I like to say, okay, today you're going to make one gratitude cold call. Salespeople are fine with cold calls. Operations people, not so much. And what we're saying is, pick a supplier, a client, a guest, a remote manager, someone you haven't talked to in a little bit, and just out of the blue, pick up the phone and say, hey, Angela, it's Brian over at the Sheraton. I just want to thank you for your company's great work with the HVAC system this month. It was really well done. We've had no problems. Boom. That's it. It's not long, right? And I argue with people about this call. I don't argue. I talk about the call. I said, I always tried to do it with vendors because I knew that vendor is servicing the 12 hotels in my community. And 11 of the hotels were phoning them to yell at them for something. Right. I was phoning them to thank them. So I knew if I had a pinch, they were going to take my call, and I was probably going to get priority service over someone else because they're going to say, oh, that's Brian. Yeah, he's a nice guy. He's, whatever. So that once a day cold call, again, 3 minutes out of your day, 4 minutes out of your day. And then the hard one that is difficult is write a handwritten thank you note to somebody and either mail it.
Yep.
Snail mail, not email for the young kids listening. There's this thing called the post office. You put it in a stamp on it and it goes. Or it's someone in your office, slip it onto their desk, slip it under their door, put it in their mail slot, something. But a handwritten note of thanks, it takes you a couple minutes to write it down. But number one, a handwritten thank you note has 100% open rate versus emails, right? If you have a card sitting on your desk when you get in the morning and it's got your name written on it, you're going to open it. Not so much, right? And then you say, wow, this person went to the length took the time to handwrite me a thank you note. It goes a long, long way. And so just things of that nature. I mean, we've got a whole program around it. But think of any business you're in. If you're in the manufacturing world and you're in a factory or whatever, you can gauge what you do, right? And there's all different ways of expressing gratitude, right? It can be public, private, and all those things. And we could have a whole call on that if you wanted. But It's so important to do this on a daily basis. And so we have these cutout sheets. You just say, okay, this is day 3. It's Wednesday. Boom. Here's what I'm doing. And then at the end of the week, we have a little reflection sheet that we ask you to spend a couple times over a cup of coffee on a Saturday morning or something. Just reflect on some of the things you did this week, how it made you feel, how it made them feel, and then what are some of the goals for next week coming up based upon how it felt and how it went. So we do it for 3 weeks. And our hope is that within the 3 weeks timeline, the managers under you, the employees under you, start to see this on a daily basis. And the hope, of course, is that they will start instituting at their level the same type of thing. And so you get a culture. This theory of gratitude becomes part of the company culture. It's not forced, it's just done. And again, it's just making it a habit and making it who you are. So sorry, I know I kind of went off on a deep end there, but I get a little excited about the thing.
No, you're hitting on many of the habit development things that we talk about in learning and development circles. So it's important to understand that. And thank you for clarifying how that program works for you guys.
Yeah, no, I developed it, and the other thing that I found, one company that really embraced the whole power of gratitude at work. Mm-hmm. The chief operating officer is an acquaintance of mine now. I consider him a friend. But what I loved he did every Monday morning during the 3 weeks, because they rolled it out company-wide. I loved it. Every Monday morning, he would write a thank you note email to everybody, reminding them about the program and what, all that kind of stuff. And that started resonated with everybody, and they had some great results. So, the leadership, I did a little survey a long time ago about, what is a barrier to your company's expressing gratitude? And the number one response, and I forget the percentage, because you and I actually talked about this a little bit, was the fact that the senior leaders were not modeling gratitude. So if the senior leaders aren't doing it, the others won't. Now, you don't want it to be a forced top down. You want it to be all over, but senior leaders got to lead the way. That's why you're a leader. So, that was interesting to me that, people want to do this. They just don't know how.
So speaking of the how, we're going to talk about the spirit of acknowledgement, the spirit method. And you said you prepared today someone that you wanted to thank.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've always had people to thank. So
we're gonna walk through the spirit method, and you have many of these elements, so this won't be very difficult for you.
So do you want me to pick one person, and then we'll
do one at a time. We'll do one at a time. How's that sound? So the spirit is okay?
Yeah.
The spirit method, I think you're familiar with it, is saying specifically what they've done, making it personal. Like, what are the obstacles that they've overcome in order to take those actions? And because we're talking about organizational things here, organizational things, we talk about the impact, like what did those actions do to your organization? So for example, if your vendor, if he's a plumber and he's making sure that you had no downtime, et cetera, or their response rates were XYZ so that you were, when you were full capacity, whatever those look like for you in the hospitality industry. And then the R, so impact is metric specific, and the R is relevance. And that's talking about how they are relating back to your organizational values. And then the next I is for being inclusive, and that's the way of making it public and timely. There's a lot of research that shows that the closer you thank someone to the event in which it took place, the greater impact it actually has in the emotional well-being of that person, feeling seen, feeling heard, and truly, like, it's literally measurable in the body. Of course, we're not doing that in the workplace, but we can measure those things through some of the neuroscience at this point. Mm-hmm. So that's the spirit method. So you have a person, and what are you thanking them for?
Yeah, well, here, let's use, let's see, a good way to model that one would be, okay, I'm going to think, might be a two-person think.
It's fine. Let's hear.
And so Rick Sewell and Dave Miles.
Okay.
And so Rick Sewell was a senior level vice president with Starwood Hotels, and Dave Miles was a vice president at the time. And I was the general manager of a hotel in Tampa, Florida. And so I got a call and they said, listen, we are going to try this new concept called complexing. And I said, great. But what does that have to do with me, type of thing? And they said, well, we think you're the guy who should be the general manager of this project. And I said, okay, fine. I don't know anything about complexing. It's very common now, 2 or 3 brands in one building. But this is back in 1998. So it was going to be Starwood's first venture into complexing. We were going to put a Westin and a Sheraton in one building. One tower is the Sheraton, one tower is the Westin,
Okay.
and run the 2 brands and all. There's a multitude of reasons why. So they said, you're our guy. And I said, well, great. Give me 5 minutes and I'll let you know. And Rick said, well, why do you need 5 minutes? I said, I have to look up where Indianapolis is on a map. I said, I'm Canadian. I don't know where it is. And he laughed. He said, just go home, talk to Rosa and make sure you guys are okay for moving from Florida to Indianapolis. I said, sure. So that was kind of the genesis of what started, was their view of me being able to do this and me not knowing why they could see that in me. But they saw something in me that thought that would work, right? So we move up there, we open this thing. It's a massive failure. Because of multitude of things. It wasn't a failure because of the team. It wasn't a failure because of me. It was just the first one. And there were all kinds of mistakes made. So while I get a call from Rick again, 2 years later, thinking I'm getting fired because his administrative assistant phone said, hey, Rick wants to talk to you tomorrow at 2:00.
Oh, man.
That's never a good call, right? So I
2
said,
o'clock on Friday. That's the worst phone call.
Luckily it was on a Thursday, so it wasn't too bad. But so I said to my wife that night, I said, hey, we may be unemployed and living in Carmel, Indiana for some time. But so I get the call and he says, listen, Dave and I, again, we're starting a new team called New Builds and Transitions. And we want you to head that up as the director, the number 2 guy under Dave. I don't know what a Phillips screwdriver is. I've never done construction. I've never opened hotels, developed hotels. And I specifically asked, why me, right? But thank you, but why me? And they laid out the plan that I had worked with almost every division within the Starwood corporate structure by virtue of doing this new complex. And the fact that it didn't work was not my fault. So they made me feel good by saying, you did a great job under the circumstances. We're going to give you this cool promotion and start this team for new builds. And so the impact was like, wow, you guys own me. Whatever you want me to do, I will do for you for the rest of my life, right? Because I was thinking I was going to get fired, and here I get another promotion. And it was all because of the hard work and their leadership. But that impact of them showing trust and confidence in me was unbelievable, right? So I think that had I can never thank those 2 guys enough. I've always said that those 2 guys gave me my career.
Yes.
Because they made a huge impact on me. And I forget what was the R for?
Relevance, and it refers to like values. Like, what are their value statements or the organization's value statements?
Well, yeah, and that's the value statement was, hey, you're a good person, you do a good job, and just because the project might not have worked, we see the value in you. So the relevance was, now you're still getting promoted.
Innovation and recognition of efforts and everything. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So those 2 guys were instrumental in my development and my growth. And again, I couldn't thank 2 better people.
Nice.
So hopefully that worked within your spirit model.
Yes. Yeah. But it's always interesting to hear how people word it. And sometimes I have to help them word it, but you are experienced in your gratitude giving. So So thank you. You said you had another that you wanted to formally recognize today?
Well, I mean, I have a whole bunch.
I know you have a whole list. We
sure.
often do, but we have a few more minutes if you want one more.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to thank another pair. Well, actually, first I'm going to thank my wife and my daughters, just in case they ever listen to this and hear it, because they've put up with me for all these years. But the other one, again, was a gentleman with a company called Interstate Hotels. And I was working with Four Seasons Hotels at the time. And when you work for Four Seasons Hotel in our business, that's kind of like the top, right? You're at the top of the ladder. You've got the best product in town, the nicest hotel. I mean, you're ultra luxury. Hotels are packed. You're meeting celebrities. I've served presidents and kings and everything else, and you're doing all that. Well, there was a guy by the name of Bob Graney who worked for Interstate Hotels, and he approached me and he said, "Listen, we want you to come work at an Interstate." And I said, "What are you, nuts? Interstate Hotels. You run 3-star hotels, 4-star hotels at the best." And he sat me down over lunch one day and walked through all the attributes and the positive things that would come to me if I made this switch. And he did it very methodically. Okay. And he said, "Listen, yeah, you're at the Four Seasons Beverly Hills. There's nothing better than the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills. You're there. But here's what we're going to provide for you. We're going to give you a path to being a GM by the time you're X years old, which is your goal. We're going to give you the tools to learn the hotel business as a business." And I was very fortunate that Alan Cramey and Ted Darnell taught me the hotel business as a business, because in Four Seasons in those days, it was more fluff than substance, because you're just making so much money. You could spend money on anything and make sure you had the best. But that's not the entire hospitality world. So Bob was able to lay all this out. And then more importantly, Angela, he followed through on it step by step by step. And within a year and a half of leaving the Four Seasons to join Interstate, I had my first GM's role at the Colonial Inn in La Jolla, California. It would have taken me another 6 to 7 years if I was lucky with Four Seasons. And it's not because they're not a good company. They just have a different management method. Right. And so by virtue of Bob holding all that and the impactfulness, all the things you talked about, he just hit on all keys. So he's the one who got me to my first GM's job, by virtue of laying out the plan and adhering to it, and really through great leadership and teaching got me to that spot. So he would be another big one in my books.
Thank you for sharing that. And it's a great example of leadership, but also talent development and talent management, looking for someone, even if it is outside of their network, but really growing and then also delivering, right? Like they didn't just make empty promises. They delivered on their promises as well. And that is sometimes rare.
A lot of times it's rare.
Yeah. Yes. So, Brian, what else do you have to share with us? We have just 1 or 2 more minutes and we need to sign off. How can people get a hold of you?
I am all over LinkedIn. I'm a junkie on LinkedIn. Okay. I have websites I have leedshospitalitygroup.com for consulting. I have the Tuesday Thanks podcast. It's on all the normal channels. There's a website, tuesdaythanks.com. I've just created a new website for the Power of Gratitude at Work. So that's at powergratitudeatwork.com. I've just created a new LinkedIn page for the Power of Gratitude at Work. So all of those, just look me up on LinkedIn. I always tell people is the easiest way, because I'm a junkie on LinkedIn. It's the only kind of social media I'm really on, if you call it that. But I'm on there all the time.
And also join us in the Gratitude Leadership Collective.
Exactly.
So we can chat gratitude all day long. Brian, thank you very much. I'll make sure to get those links in the show notes. And then I also do a blog that supports the episode when it comes out as well. So I appreciate you. If you would like to learn more about the Voices in Leadership.live, you can join us at our website, apply to be a guest, suggest a guest, or if you have any sort of feedback, there is a place where you can click on that little microphone and share your thoughts. Appreciate hearing from you. Look forward to talking to you next week.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you for joining us on Voices in Leadership, where leaders who connect, inspire, and grow share their stories. I look forward to welcoming you back to our next conversation. In the meantime, visit www.voicesinleadership.live to access show notes, links, and to subscribe and stay connected. And in the spirit of gratitude, let's remember to thank one person near you. Until next time, this is Dr. Angela J. Buckley, signing off.